So, hey everybody, thanks for watching. This is the second part of our Ansible intro, when we're going to be doing a little bit more of a deeper dive here into some of the more advanced concepts that you can do. If you are coming across this through some sort of search in YouTube, there is a part one that leads into this video and is more of a primer of how to get started. We'll have those notes in the video notes, and you can watch that video for a little bit more of a primer. Our speaker tonight is Jeremy Murrah, and we're going to hand it back over to him, and he's going to take over from here.
Hello there, children. All right, round two. Second verse, same as the first. Now, so for this section, I wanted to dive into some of the more specifics of Windows, right? Specifically around connecting to a Windows machine. So Ansible by default is being a Linux program and was built around connecting to Linux machines. It assumes that it's going to use SSH to connect to everything for Linux. For Windows, it is not yet using SSH, but is using WinRM. So same sort of thing. It's that agentless remote connection to execute scripts, but it's using WinRM instead of SSH. There's a little more. That's a little more involved. So we need to give it a little more detail. Obviously, we need to give it a username and password to connect to it. We need to tell it things like we'd have to tell it to use WinRM. It doesn't know it's Windows until we tell it to use WinRM. And that's where there's Ansible connection. And then there's the port information. So I'll get into some more details on WinRM, right? But there's different methods of connecting. You can use different ports. You have the transport here, which is where you get into sort of authentication mechanisms. Are you using basic authentication, or because you hate security, or are you using certificates because you love security, or are you using Kerberos like a normal person would use in a corporate Windows domain environment, or some variation of any of those? And then there's my favorite, is this WinRM message encryption. In fact, I dedicated several slides to this one property because it's like my favorite part of Ansible and Windows since it was invented. So let's talk about, let's do a little trip down memory lane and talk about the challenges of Windows and Ansible in the early days, which was like 2 years ago because internet speed of things. So when you turn on a Windows machine or install an image from Vagrant and turn it on for the first time, you go in and then turn on remoting. By default, Windows will create a listener for WinRM on port 5985 that is not plain text. It's not SSL encrypted with a certificate, but it does what's called message encryption. So it actually encrypts the data inside that connection. So you can't just like read your commands over the internet. So that's what the default is for Windows. You can also do add certificates to the machine, self-signed or otherwise. You can tell WinRM to create an endpoint on listening on port 5986, give it the certificate, do the certificate binding and say, use this certificate and encrypt the whole thing and do a whole tunnel encryption and all that. So, and that uses the connection encryption there. And that's an option. That takes some work with the certificates and custom configuration on the machine. But those are the kind of your two options, more or less, with Windows, right? Now, the problem is that previously or originally with Windows or with Ansible, you had two options. If you told Ansible use port 5985, it assumed that you were doing completely plain text data. And we all know better. Like you can do that with Windows. You can tell Windows to use plain text, but that's a bad idea. So that was the one option. The other option, you could tell it to do certificates, and that would, you do connection encryption, but you had to do certificates. So if you told it 5986, you did certificates. The problem there is that both of those two options required some sort of configuration on your endpoint. So great, it's agentless, but now I've got a situation where I have to go and change WinRM settings on every machine that I want to touch. And that can be a little sketchy, especially the plain text one, right? That's a horrible idea. If, you go tell your security guys, I want to change all my Windows machines so that all my secret commands are going plain text, right? You might get kicked out the door. So that was kind of sad, and that can be a big hurdle. But in PyWinRM, which is the backend module, version 0.30, and I remember the number because I was super excited. Like I literally got up and ran around the office and did laps cheering like an idiot when I saw that this worked. They added the support for that WinRM message encryption. which meant now you could tell it use port 5985 and support message encryption, which meant Ansible could work with Windows WinRM settings out of the box. So no longer did you have to make any changes. You could work with the default Windows settings. And that was huge because now you can just turn on a machine and you can hit it with Ansible without any pre-configuration on the machine. As long as remoting is on and default, you can connect. So the reason I spent 3 slides talking about this is if you're reading help files and documentation and community blogs and getting started guides and everything, there's a whole lot of content that talks about how to use certificates, right? Like they were smart and no one told you to use plain text, except for that one guy. But no one told you to use plain text. They all told you to use certificates. And there was a lot of work done to help you, like helper scripts that said, here's how to like create a self-signed cert, and here's how to create the listeners, and just run this script and it'll work. And a lot of, so to the community's credit, right? That was the option. And so there's a lot of documentation. So if you're just getting started like today and you start Googling stuff, everything you read is going to say, use a certificate, and you're going to get kind of bummed out potentially because that may, not be something you want to do. So I wanted to like mention, you don't have to use certificates. You can use this WinRM message encryption option and just connect to your machine. So I wanted to mention that. So that's the first big thing that was super exciting. The less exciting thing with Windows, specifically with Kerberos. So if you're in a domain environment or enterprise environment, which is kind of the point of using Ansible, right? You're going to run into a problem. It's called the Kerberos Double Hop authentication issue. And this has always been around there. This isn't specific to Windows at all. I mean, to Ansible at all. This is just a thing with Kerberos, basically where you're on a machine and then you go to another machine, you authenticate to this machine to do something, but then you're like logged into this machine through like a, some sort of connection like WinRM or not a RDP, but like a remote connection. And you say, oh, while I'm here, I'm going to go to this third machine. But the problem, because of the way Kerberos does authentication and the tickets, is you can't really do that. You don't really have an authentication. You don't have permission to go to this third machine. So that's the double hop, right? One hop is to this one, and then the double hop. So it doesn't come up a lot in normal day-to-day Windows operations. Like there's examples about like if you're trying to impersonate a user through a website to a SQL database, that's kind of where it come up with Corey. Horrible advice. Speaking of which, I have a slide on that. Oh, so it's not so much of an issue in Windows, but the problem with Ansible is everything you do in Ansible is Linux, right? So if you're going to run anything Windows, the first thing you got to do is connect to a Windows machine. Whether you're configuring that Windows machine or not, you've got to connect to Windows machine. So everything that you do, every task you run is already one hop in. So if that task is like create a domain user, you have 2 options. That one hop could be, oh, run this task on my domain controller, like let's connect to my domain controller, let's log in and then run some random script from the internet on my domain controller. And that's just a different kind of bad idea. So that's not preferred. Or connect to a jump box and then from there, make the connection to AD with AD commandlets to do my AD task. The problem is that connection to AD from my jump box, that's a second hop. So that's going to fail. Or if you're like, oh, let's connect to a web server, or let's copy a file, right? Let's connect to this machine and then copy a file from the network. So there are a lot more times where you'll run into a second hop in Ansible because everything is already one hop in. So this beautiful artwork here is to sort of to graphically interface or explain all those words I just said there. So you have several options though. And this is not in preference order by any means. But one option is instead of using Kerberos as your transport, you could use CreditSSP, which is just this weird security sort of thing to basically give credentials to another machine and say, hey, I trust you. Use these however you see fit. So you can see how that might be a bad idea. So aside from being potentially sketchy on the security front, it does require configuration. You have to turn that on. So you have to do some work to enable that with certificates on the machine. Oh, okay. So Jordan says it does not require certificates. So ignore bullet point number 2. But it does require you to can do some configuration regardless. You got to turn it on your machines, unless you've got like a GPO that just turns it on everywhere, and then you got bigger issues because that's not really ideal. So that's an option potentially if you're aware of the pitfalls of CreditSSP. The other option here is to do Kerberos delegation, which is sort of Kerberos' solution to the double hop issue. And that's tricky. You have to go and do some work on the machines to define it and say, oh, okay, you're allowed to do this second hop, but only to this kind of service. So it's a whole thing, and you got to like know Kerberos, and you know, you got to know Kerberos. So that's tricky. And then you still got to make a bunch of changes. You might have to get your domain admin involved if that's not you, and be like, hey, I want to do delegation, and they're going to look at you sideways and want to know why, and you better be able to explain why. But again, you got to know Kerberos. So there's some restrictions around that can be tricky. The better option, or more built-in, easier option, is to use the become property. So Ansible has this option here, this keyword called become, and that comes from the Linux land of doing like the the elevation of the su or sudo, like sort of elevate and run like kind of as root. Take this task and I'm going to run as a user and run it with elevated credentials. Now in Windows land, that has absolutely nothing to do with UAC elevation. So when I first started reading about this, because the way it works in Linux land with that elevation to root, I thought, oh, this is like UAC. Nope, nothing to do with UAC. In fact, when you do a WinRM connection, UAC is out of the picture anyway. Become, when you see the word become or the usage of the become option, just think run as. This is a way to run as, is what all that means in Windows land. It just means run as. So you can say run as the same user. You can, become is like sudo or su, or you can specify. There's a bunch of different methods, but yeah, it's like sudo for Linux, but it's run as for Windows. And so you can run as the same user, you can run as a different user. The important thing is that when you are doing that, you're saying create a new connection. So start my hop count over. It's gonna pass those creds over in a secure way and basically create a new connection. So this is kind of the best way. And because it's built into Ansible, you can set this become flag on a task. You can set it on a play, you can set it on a playbook, you can set it on a host. So you can do a lot of different things, and you can say run this one task with this elevation, or this run this other task with something else. So in the case of the example I used, like the domain, right? I'm going to connect to a jump box, and I'm going to use an account that has like just access to that jump box, right? And then I want to say, okay, let's run a task that connects to the domain to create a user or something, right? Well, maybe I say become, and become user is going to be my domain admin account. So I'm only using my super mega domain admin account to do that one task to the DCs. But because run as, I can change users there, that's an option. So become is what you want to look at. There's a bunch of flags and options for that. So I don't get into much more of the details. I've got a little link at the bottom here to the official documentation. In fact, I didn't mention this earlier, but most of the slides, I put a little footer in there to the Ansible documentation, which I mentioned is really good. And so each kind of page, like become, it has a lot more detail on all the options for kind of every little short slide deck I have here. So yeah, the other option 3, and this is pretty obscure, and I had to test this to see if it would actually work, is you can actually use WinDSC to run as a different user. So if you recall, if you ever use DSC, just kind of native, by default, it runs stuff as system. Right? When you run a task, it will run a system. You can use this PSDSC run as credential to run it as a different user. So you could do like the shell resource, the script resource in DSC to run whatever script you wanted to do. PSDSC run as credential to give it credentials to run as, and then it would make a new connection and start that hop count over to connect your machine. It's kind of like a game of shoots and ladders, and probably not at all recommended for any use case ever, but it might work. Mostly I included that because I wanted to talk about WinDSC, so that seemed like a weird way of doing that. So let's talk about WinDSC, but first, are there any questions about Kerberos or the connection stuff or any of those other fancy slides while I type a drink?
Probably one point is, if you're using NTLM, I would try and avoid HTTP or 5985. While it's encrypted, it's using RC4 with a weaker key, so it's not highly secure compared to Kerberos or CreditSSP with message encryption.
Okay, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, I guess it wouldn't be. It would be using the super awesome old encryption mechanism of the transport. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why Windows forces you to trust the host if you're using NTLM over HTTP.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, so this is for Corey. This is, I wanted to do a comparison between DSC and WinDSC. So how you would do this, and so I used SMB1 as my option. You know, a year and a half ago or whatever, when I was building this for Summit, I got on Twitter and I messaged Ned Pyle and I said, hey man, I'm going to put in a slide in my presentation to tell people how to turn on SMB1. And he told me not to, so I did it anyway. But you absolutely shouldn't turn on SMB1. I just needed to have something as an example, and I was trying to be funny. Yeah, we should probably put like a black bar through. Mike, you should probably put a black bar through this so people don't know how to turn on SMB1.
Put a dancing lady in front of it.
Do what?
Put a dancing lady in front of it or something like that.
There you go, yeah. Obscure the details. Okay, so WinDSC is an Ansible module, and you use it like you use any other task in Ansible. The cool thing about it is it allows you to run any DSC resource that exists. So there are a lot of Windows modules in Ansible. There used to not be very many. There's quite a few now. There's way more DSC resources, right? There's like thousands of them out there that people have written for every weird thing that you can imagine. So just with this one task, you've just like quadrupled the landscape of kind of things you can do with Ansible. So I wanted to kind of include this side by side to talk about how you would use it. I hope this makes sense. So in DSC, right, you've got like this is how you would do it in a, what do they call them? Configuration, DSC configuration. I'm like forgetting all my DSC now. And now I'll mention this is all with PowerShell 5 and DSC 5. Whenever they figure out what they're going to do with whatever new thing with DSC they're going to invent at some point, this is obviously doesn't apply. So any of the core stuff or whatever magic they come up with in the future, this is going to be just for the Windows PowerShell. I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know if they know. I haven't kept up with it, but so this is in this example. This is the registry resource, right? So you're going to do things like specify the key and the value name and the data, right? That's all the details of the registry thing. Here's our DSC run as credential to run as a different user. The catch here is that credential, $credential here, this PSD run as credential, it is a proper PowerShell credential object, right? It's a complex object. And you can't really do complex objects in text. They don't translate well. We talked about how you got to do like JSON to get some data back. It's kind of a mess. So the esteemed writer of WinDSC has decided what they will do is if you have a something underscore username and then something underscore password, and that something is the same, it'll be like, oh, these two are the same. This is a pair. So in the module code, I'm going to take these two. I'm going to create a credential object because it's PowerShell at that point. Once it's running the task on your host, it's going to create an actual credential object, and it's going to put it in the name of whatever that common prefix is. So this pair of properties here is sort of the equivalent to this. And why that's cool is that you could, well, one, you don't have to worry about doing encrypted MOFs, which if you've ever done encrypted MOF files in DSC, it's not particularly pleasant experience. So you don't have to deal with that anymore. And two, it's not just this PSD run as credentials. So some of the other resources that would ask for multiple credentials, like some of the domain ones, they ask you for a couple of different credential objects. We'll see in the demo. You can create as many of those pairs as you want. You also have to give it the resource name, right? So this is going to match the registry here. So you're telling it what DSC resource to pass all the rest of this stuff to. And then everything else is just properties that go into the resource. So the rest of it is just whatever it needs to be. And so you know, it's pretty straightforward there. So, and we'll show you in the demo some of the more details. Behind the scenes, this is using Invoked DSC resource. So what's crucial here is, yeah, no more MOFs. This is not using a pull server. This isn't doing the LCM. This isn't doing any of that fancy, funky DSC stuff. This is just basically saying, hey, run this resource. Here's the inputs. Shut up about your MOFs. Just do the thing and get it back to me. Which is great in this case because it's just connect, execute, and get the data back. There are a couple of things you got to do ahead of time, right? So it's up to you to get your resource files out there. There's no pull server in this scenario for it to go and download from. So that's up to you, which copying files is easy, right? It's Linux. They love copying files. There's like 50 ways of doing that. The other big thing is that if you need to disable your LCM refresh, you can do one or two things. You can use DSC with a pull server and a refresh and all that stuff, or you can use Invoked DSC resource. You can't do both at the same time. It's like one or the other. So this is an option thing here too. And this, I would mention this next hypothetical, and this is totally hypothetical. This didn't actually happen to me in production. Okay, no, it totally happened to me in production. You can only run Invoke DSC resource once on a box at a time, right? Like if I log in and run it, that's cool. If you log in and run it at the same time I'm running it, we're going to have a problem. So if you're using a DSC resource to connect to a machine and configure that machine, that's fine. Like you're probably not going to do that twice. But if you're doing something like, let's use DSC to configure a domain property, like create a user in a domain, and then you package that up in a playbook and you give it to all your coworkers and they're all using it too, and then two people run it at the same time and they connect to the same shared jump box that you guys all use for running these things, and it tries to run the same task at the same time, it's going to blow up. One of you is going to win, and then one of you is going to be sad. So if you're using that kind of scenario, think about maybe not doing this. So that's just a caveat I wanted to throw in there because that was pretty weird when that happened. Okay, so any questions on magic slides before we get to the demo? Hopefully this is sufficiently more advanced than the other stuff. Okay, let's launch our demo. Come on, Ansible. Okay, demo 3. Let's talk about WinDSC. So we're going to get back into our lab building here. We're going to do some. Build our domain here, right? We already installed earlier. We installed our prep work, right? So I'm gonna. This is hopefully my machines didn't time out, but I'm going to. This is another one where I'm going to run the playbook because it takes a while to build a domain. So I'm going to run this and then close it, and then we'll go talk about it. And hopefully it'll actually work, not like the other time. So playbook. And my stuff is encrypted. So I'm going to have it ask me the password. And I will just, oh man, what? Did I type that wrong? I might have typed that wrong. Okay, hold on. Oh, what did I call it? Son of a... Maybe I did uppercase.
Did you try password?
Did I try password? Man, okay. What did I encrypt? I got it right here. Summit. Oh, Summit 2019, not PS Summit. All right. Luckily, hackers can't read comment files, so I don't have to worry about that. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So that's gonna run. Oh wait, hold on. Hold on. Point of order. VS Code is still kind of funky with like resizing these terminal windows, especially with Ansible, because it's like going through a WSL and it's all text. So if you're going to do this, you got like, I want to expand this later, so I'm going to expand it now. Otherwise, it like you have this big black hole where nothing is in there. So let's try that again. Yeah, if I type this enough, I'll get it right. Okay, so that's going to run. Hopefully that'll work. I'm going to close that, let it run in the background. And let's talk about our playbook. Okay, so here's a vars file, since I had that open. We'll talk about that. This is one of the other places you can store variables. So this is literally just a key value pair. So these are just variables that I am listing in a YAML file. You can see I got my password encrypted like a good admin. And then I can just pull them into my playbook. So if I put that over there, oh, I can't do that. Hold on. If I open this, and then I put that over there. So you can see Well, later down. Okay, so you see it later. Further, we'll talk about this when we get to it. But you can pull in the vars files. You can say, hey, go look up all the vars in this file and just throw them in memory and then use them for this playbook. So anyway, we don't need to look at that. So let's ignore that for now. Okay, so this, again, being a little more advanced, we're going to do 3 plays in this playbook. So let me minimize these and I'll talk about what we're doing. So the first thing we want to do, and the reason I do 3 plays is because I'm connecting to 3 different sets of machines to run my tasks. So that's kind of the delineating mark, like run these tasks on this machine and then do a new play to run these tasks on that machine. So my first play is I'm going to do all my prerequisites that I talked about in the slides. I'm going to disable the LCM and I'm going to copy my resources out there and I'm going to get everything ready so that I can use DSC. And I'm going to run that on all my machines here. The second play, I'm actually going to create the domain. So Mike, this one's for you. This is how you create a domain with DSC. I'll show you that. And then my third play is my new domain that I just created. I'm going to add my members server, my member server in that group to the machine. So that's why it's 3 plays. Now, notice that I'm alternating here. On play 1 and 3, I did a comment to kind of describe what I'm doing. And then in play 2, I did the better thing of just putting a name property on my play. You see, it amounts to the same thing, but it's just better because then it comes out in the output and we'll see that. So keep that in mind. This is the one I always forget. I always forget to put a name on my plays, but you totally should. So let's walk through what we're doing here.
So the question I have is the plays are so you can target them at different machines.
Right. So, well, it's a combination, right? Like I want to run a certain set of tasks on a specific set of machines. And then I want to run some different tasks on different machines, totally different machines. So I have a completely different hosts designation that I'm running.
But could you have done the same thing that you did earlier when we had the mem equals 4096 through some like filtering to say these params only match this machine and do it in one giant play? Or there's a benefit to breaking it out into separate plays?
I could, yeah. There's a ton of ways to do that. You could, yeah, okay. I could have done. This just makes it kind of a little more friendly and readable. Because if each task is like, oh, this task, the condition this is, oh, if the Ansible inventory group name is that, that's hard to read. This just makes it a little more obvious what you're doing. If that makes sense.
Yep.
So let's talk about what we're doing here. We'll drop in here. That's cool. All the stalwarts that are sticking with me. So, like I said, I need to get my machines out there. I've got a couple examples here. My favorite is the WinPS module, and that will actually, that's kind of a wrapper for the PS-Get or whatever they call it now. Well, it'll actually download the resources from a published wherever, PS Gallery or wherever, and then install them in their correct location. So that's an option. You can also just use WinCopy to copy the files out there. So, but even that WinCopy is kind of cool, right? Because notice my source, that's actually a folder in my project thing, right? My files folder in my Linux land. And then I'm saying, let's like copy it through that connection out to a folder on my target Windows machine. So those are 2 options for getting it out there. Now I added this ignore errors true so that when I run this, if it can't get to the PS Gallery for some reason, because my internet is so friggin' awesome, it'll fail. And normally this entire playbook will just halt. So here I'm saying just ignore errors. So if this one fails, it'll keep going. And then it'll do my copy, which would work because it's all local. So that's kind of how you can get around that sort of painful death of a failure. That's one option there. So then I'm going to create a folder, and then I'm going to use copy my LCM disablement script. So let's look at this file. This is where I mentioned you have to turn off the LCM refresh so that you're not doing like proper DSC, so that you can use Invoked DSC. So which one is allow reboot? So, okay, so this is nope, no thanks. Do not want that. This is a configuration. If you've done DSC, you'll be familiar with this. Is the configuration of the LCM configuration file. So this is how you configure the LCM. So this is where I'm going to go in here and I'm going to run this. This is going to execute on my target machine. And the important thing is this refresh mode equals disabled. You run that. That's what you got to have set in order for Invoked DSC resource to work. Oh, did they change that? Is that Glenn's saying that may not be a requirement anymore? So that would be nice. Yeah, so test this. This you may not need this. If you don't need this, that's one less step. So that'd be cool. It's kind of a pain. So maybe not be needed anymore. That'd be great. But if it is, this is here, and this is kind of an example of how you want to do it. Now, my example, I'm also turning this reboot node if needed. So what I'm saying is, and it's just kind of the way I'm doing the connection is I want to let DSC handle my reboots in this particular scenario instead of having Ansible do my reboots. And this is just because I'm installing AD. Ansible gets a little weird because Ansible is connected to the machine and it has to maintain that connection. And then when you turn it into a DC, that Intel authentication you just did is going to get a little flaky. So I'm basically saying let DSC do the resource, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for it to come back up and then connect to it. So anyway, the point being here, you can set any other LCM properties you want when you're running this, if you need to run this at all. I have to go test that now. So that's kind of the prerequisites. Like once we've run this on our machines, we can then now do the DSC. So let me shrink this here. And as far as running it, now this is where my demo code here is going to start showing its age. Apparently all these experimental and community nomenclature resources went away like a decade ago or something. And I missed the memo on that because I was paying attention to Ansible and not DSC, but they still exist and they still work. So, but basically here's what I'm doing. I'm creating my domain. So I'm using WinDSC and I'm saying run the XAD domain resource, and that's out of my X Active Directory module that I downloaded, or whatever they call it nowadays. So I'm providing all the properties, right? Here's my domain name. Here are the credential objects that I have to pass. And this is defined by the XAD domain resource. And so here's where I'm doing my pair, right? I have underscore username underscore password, so it's going to create this property. I'm doing my substitution of my vaulted secrets from my vars files. So it's going to, at runtime, it's going to decrypt my vars files. It's going to substitute into this, pass it all to the machine and run it over there all in memory without touching the disk. So it's pretty secure. So anyway, this is going to create the domain. And then I'm going to let DSC handle the reboot, and I'm going to use this wait for connection module. Just wait. I'm going to assume this connection is going to go down, this WinRM, and I'm going to let it like wait. So I'm just going to keep retrying. Otherwise, like Ansible, if you try to run another task after you do a reboot, Ansible will try to connect, it'll fail, and then the whole thing will be dead, right? Your playbook will stop. So this is kind of how you can say, hey, wait up to 600 seconds for that connection to come back up, so you don't like barf and kill your playbook. So only need to change it if you're using a DSC pull server. Okay, so if you've never used it, the reason I don't use WinReboot, I'm trying to remember now. I want to say it was that when the DSC resource ran, it barfed my connection, it blipped my connection, and then I couldn't reconnect because it was kind of like half a domain. And it didn't like trying to connect with a non-domain account because it was kind of a domain controller, but not really. So yeah, it was that one use case. It was kind of weird. So that's why I was like, you know what? Let me let it reboot, and then when it comes up, then I'll reconnect. So yeah, it's just it was a weird kind of halfway state because of the domain building. So yeah, and otherwise you could do a reboot, or you do a handler, or all that fancy stuff. So yeah. That's going to build the domain, and then our third play is going to connect to our member server and use a different DSC resource to join it to the domain. You see, I'm doing the same kind of thing. I'm running my prerequisites, so I'm going to copy my resources. Here's where I'm doing a loop. I think I showed an example of this earlier, where you have a loop, and then you use item as the kind of the variable name for the currently iterating object. So it's just another example to kind of show how you might copy files, multiple objects out to a target. Same thing, I'm disabling the LCM again, which may or may not be needed if you've not used DSC before. And then I'm using in this case, I'm using the wait for AD domain, because it's like, you got to wait for it to come up. Even though it's up, the machine's back up, you still got to wait for the domain to be available. So this is kind of a nice way of doing that, and just kind of doing that retry. So once the domain is like all the way up, whatever it's doing in the background there, then you can use the X computer. This is all just DSC resources. So I'm just doing that to the X computer resource to join it to the domain. Same kind of deal, right? I pass in all the properties, and this is all just variable substitution from my various files. again, passing credentials. So it's going to combine these into a credential object to pass to the resource. And here's where I'm using a handler. So before I just use a when reboot task, and I was like, reboot right now, boom. A handler is another way of doing that. And so it's a way of saying I want to potentially reboot at the end. And what this will do, so this notify is sort of like flipping a flag, right? Flipping a bit, right? Turn this thing on. So it's going to turn on the handler that's named reboot. And I could call this whatever, right? I could be like reboot after joining. And if I called it that, then I would say notify reboot after joining, whatever the name is going to be. And then it's going to run whatever the task is, right? And it doesn't have to be reboot. It can be any task. A couple things is notify only notifies, only flips that flag if the task comes back with a status of change. So if this actually does something is the only time it notifies. If it was already joined to the domain and this came back with a status of okay, that green value, then it wouldn't notify the handler, so it wouldn't sort of flip that bit. This is a good way of doing it. Like if you're installing a bunch of software or you're declaring that a bunch of software be installed, any one of those might actually trip the reboot flag or require a reboot, but you don't know which one actually will install or not. So you say, let them all notify. If any of them actually change, it'll do one reboot at the end because handlers always run at the end instead of like one after every install. And then if none of them actually installed, then none of them will notify and none of them will reboot. So you get that idempotency and reboot your machine every time you run it, that sort of thing. So yeah. Let's see, that's kind of all I had to say about that. Any questions on that before we look at the output? Did I lose everybody?
I'm still here and I'm watching.
Well, cool. Well, as long as you're here, as long as my MVP is still around, that's what matters.
Oh, I can't win.
Awesome. Thanks, Glenn. Maybe I'll see you one of these days. We'll get to like visit in person sometime in the far future. Thanks, Diego. Hopefully some of this is sticking in to you. Okay, so let's look at our output. Oh man, it didn't do nothing. Wait a minute. Didn't I run this with the right? Let's see. I could have sworn that I even had it written down on my cheat sheet, so it should have been good. So let's see. I don't know. Oh, now it's totally dead. Killed my machines. Okay. Demo gods have it out for me. Let's see. My stuff. So the output isn't super. Oh yeah, sure enough, it turned them all off. Thanks, Vagrant. Thanks. I don't know who to blame. I guess I talked for too long and it went to sleep. But anyway, so the output is basically kind of what you'd expect to see from the other ones. Right? It shows each task and it copies the files and gives you your greens and your blues and all that kind of stuff. So that part is not super informative, but I promise it works. It worked yesterday.
So effectively, it's going to look like the same as what it did when you did it the other way in part one.
Right. Yeah, it's going to show the play, and then it's going to show each task, and it's going to say like for the 3 machines or whatever machines it's working on that are in that host list, green or blue or red, or hopefully not red. Well, they're red here, but green or blue or yellow or whatever for whatever task they're doing. So it just runs the RUM, and the output's pretty straightforward. I'm not like dumping any information with debug or anything, so there's really not much like information coming to the screen other than this task worked, this task worked, this task worked, etc.
Yeah, but the magic here is that you did it a different way, and you invoked a lot more power into doing more advanced stuff.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Using that DSC integration, I can run anything. Yeah.
Mhm.
So we'll just pretend that ran, and we'll go back to this part. So any questions on any of the specifics or on the process or any of that, any of the guts of that, or?
Nope.
Cool.
Someone is asking, oh, Diego wants to know, what's a good, well, it's going back to the earlier stuff, but what's a good way to start with Ansible? I guess maybe he's feeling a little overwhelmed.
Yeah. So with anything, I found the best way to start with something is to which is kind of hard, like have an idea of something you want in mind you want to do. I will say, I will throw out a plug to Josh Duffney's book, Become Ansible. It's a great like hands-on lab style thing that walks you through like doing containers in Azure and then running some Ansible playbooks to like provision machines out in Ansible. I really enjoyed it. It's very like an interactive lab hands-on type of stuff. So that might be a good option to follow along with that. But like this, if you wanted to do this, if you go out to the GitHub, which I have to pull the link up, but everything that's in here, this entire folder, like all my demos and all the files you need are included. So you could, in theory, download this, clone this repo, install VirtualBox and Vagrant, and then run all the files and follow along this entire thing. So you could build the Windows VMs and then you could run the playbooks and do all that configuration. So that might be an option as well.
Is there an Ansible cert?
That's a good question.
I was thinking maybe Jordan could jump.
The actual details, I'm not too sure, but there's definitely a Red Hat certificate or test or accreditation for Ansible.
Okay, specifically for Ansible? Interesting.
Yep.
Yeah, it looks like it's Red Hat Certified Ansible Administration.
Oh, they have their own one. Wow, that's cool. I should go take that. Maybe I can get a raise or something. Let's see. I was going to type it. I can pull it up. I'll paste in my.
Put it in the chat. There you go.
Yeah, let me pull it up because I'll type it wrong and then it'll be wrong forever. And actually, I guess I can just say it's. I think that's it. Let's see. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay. So yeah, this is it. So as I've been going through, everything is sort of numbered. You can open up each folder independently to do the demos in that section. So the playbooks that I've been running, like each time I close it and reopen VS Code, I've been opening up these folders in sequence. The folder one, the Ansible 101, it has the WSL config folder. So that's got the file on how to prep your WSL environment. So like you install WSL, which I don't even remember how you do it now. I think it's through the store app now. You can install. It used to be a whole big thing to install WSL. So you install WSL. Ubuntu is what I use, but it should work on anything. And then you can walk through the commands here, run these commands and do this stuff, and then you should be able to just run the Ansible commands. And then you can run the Ansible playbooks, all that. So then you can watch the video recording and follow along and kind of do some hands off. And then you get the playbooks and you can tweak them and add tasks and remove tasks and all that kind of stuff.
So just going back to Diego's question before. So Diego, just remember that Ansible is a tool to automate things, right? It's an automation tool, right? You could do this stuff by hand, but who wants to, especially in scale? So if you want to get started with Ansible, right, you have this desire to automate things. You have to, as Jeremy was saying, find something that appeals to you, like build a server, build a VM, and just baby step it up, and you will become more comfortable doing the tasks a little bit at a time, building on top of them, right? Because, I mean, where Jeremy is here in these demos, we're into some pretty heavy stuff here. It would be pretty hard to probably start and try to tackle these things. But spin up the environment, spin up a machine, put some credentials in there, add some parameters, change a few things around, try building 2 machines, right? I know you know the thing. It's find the thing that relates to you, and then just, with VMs, you just build it, throw it away until you understand what's happening over and over again.
Yep, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're learning Python, you'll have a heads up because I don't know any Python. It's so weird to me, but yeah. Yeah, it's cool. Does Chef run on YAML files? So Chef is the same kind of tool as Ansible, a configuration management tool. It's totally different. I don't know much about it. I don't think it's YAML. It's like its own kind of files. Glenn does Puppet. I don't know if we have any. Michael does Chef, but he's gone. I don't know if we have any Chef people in the.
I'm pretty sure it's just written in Ruby.
Yeah.
System to like Vagrant or something like that. But yeah, no, I've never used Chef, but I'm pretty sure it's Ruby.
Yeah, and you gotta it's like proper Ruby. Like you gotta know Ruby to write the things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and Chef I think it has agents and it has like a master control server. So it addresses the same problems or the same solutions, but it does it in a whole kind of totally different sort of way.
Yeah, they have like different overlaps. Like Chef and Puppet are probably more closely aligned where they have an actual agent that runs to make sure the state doesn't change and stuff like that. That's probably an area where Ansible doesn't do as well. But they've all got their advantages and disadvantages for different features and different reasons for using them.
Yeah, sometimes having the agent and being able to sort of enforce state can be nice sometimes if you're in that kind of environment. I will say, kind of since we're on the topic of comparison, one of the things that I like about Ansible is that it seems to me, again, I haven't used Chef or Puppet, but just from reading about them and having the agent and sort of enforcing state is they're sort of targeted at that like magic DevOps land where everything is configuration as code and people don't log into servers anymore and it's all very strictly controlled. And there's a stepping stone to get there, right? You don't just wake up one day in your company and be like, we're DevOps now. No one logs in. Everything is source control. What I like about Ansible is that if you're just like in old enterprise and you're just like, look, I just want to run this thing on my server and close this ticket, you can do that. And then you can get more and more advanced and it sticks with you. And eventually you end up in magic DevOps land where everything's configuration as code and everything is pipelines running and building your web farm. But you don't have to make that huge, gigantic leap. And that could be, maybe that's not fair to the other tools. That could be a misconception on my part, but I think that's an important step because that's how companies are going to go, right? We're not all Facebook. We didn't all wake up in, configuration as code land. So I like that Ansible is very flexible and that you can use it the way it should be, and then you can use it any way you want, So that's just my opinion on it 2 beers in.
So way back you were telling me a little bit like this is the life you live at work, but
yeah,
what is Ansible doing at work for you? Like this is not building one-off server builds, I guess, right? This is probably for building out many iterations of the same type of device or something like that, or
yeah. So I kind of got a little carried away with it, as I am wont to do when I first started using it, and my first project, they always say that like for something new, you should pick something small to kind of like prove it out, and then expand from there. I didn't do that. What I did, I started out, my very first project was to fully automate our entire server provisioning process. So I have a playbook, well, several playbooks and a bunch of roles and files that bare metal provision VMs, physical servers, Linux, Windows, and takes a bunch of inputs. So it's not the same kind of machine, right? It's like the same base image, right? Windows or whatever. But it can be on a VM. It can be on several different versions of physical hardware because we're an old people company, and so we put Windows on bare metal still. When it's bare metal, and that's what I like about Ansible is like I can interface with the hardware calls to put the OS on the machine and configure the BIOS, and then I can do calls out to our IPAM to reserve myself an IP address, and then I can do the Windows configuration, and then if our DBAs ever let us, I can actually do the SQL installs and like, you know, do that sort of thing. So that's what we have now, and then using Tower, we actually tied it in with, we use Remedy because again we're an old person company, so we have Remedy instead of the useful ticketing system. But we actually have building a service catalog in Remedy so that you can request a service and get like a self-service call. And that's where the Tower API comes in, right? So you can be like, yeah, I know, right? So like Remedy can make an API call to Tower to kick off a playbook, pass in the inputs like what's the server name and all that jazz, what kind of server should it be, right? And then provision it appropriately. So that's kind of what I started with, and then I've just been kind of expanding from there to do other little menial tasks, right? Like disk expansion and retirement, cleanup, and you know, all kinds of other little things that are like, I do this every day and it friggin' sucks getting these stupid tickets, so let's automate it.
Disk expansion, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's kind of a handy one. So, you know, our VM guys, we have VMware. We use VMware because again, we're an old person company. Well, we have like 2 containers somewhere under someone's desk, but so you know, it's VMware. Like you got to go to the OS, the machine, log into it, and they say, oh, I want 50 more gig on my D drive, right? And you look at the D drive, and then you got to go to VMware and figure out, well, which friggin' disk is the D drive, right? And you figure that out. Then you extend it there, and then you go back to the machine, and then you increase it. So it takes you 5 minutes or whatever, times however many machines. So with Ansible, because it can connect in a sequenced orchestration sort of way to all these different interfaces, it can do vSphere, PowerCLI commands, so we can just kind of do all that. So you sort of like, what's my task, right? My task is expand the disk, and then in there, or what's the thing that I want to do? You build a playbook, and then each of those is like, go to vSphere, get this data, go to the Windows, get this data, then figure it out, and then expand, you know, do all the expansion, and then, you know, do it in that sequence. So in the same way you would write like a script, you just have to write less of it because so much of it is already written for you.
Damn, that's cool.
Yeah.
I could just imagine though that takes a good amount of setup in the beginning to get that working. But,
yeah, I mean, you don't start off with something like that, right? Like I shouldn't have started off with a server build. I should have started off with something much simpler, but it's less than you would think, right? Because like the call to get the info for vSphere is one task. The call to connect to the Windows machine to get the disk info is one task. There's a module called like, I think it's win disk facts, and it gets everything and sticks it into a variable. So you don't have to write a crap ton of code. You just reference one task. And then you munge it together, and then you write the expansion, go to vSphere and expand the disk. That's one task. Go to Windows and expand it. That's another task. So your playbook could be like 50 lines, which is an incredibly complex thing you're doing, but there's so much code that you don't have to write that, you know, it helps. So, which is great. You know, it really extends what you're able to do, you know.
So I'm curious about like you get a disk expansion. How do you have a playbook for disk expansion, or do you have that as a task in like a generic kind of playbook, and you can call that just singular task?
That is a playbook.
Okay,
So
and then you just run that playbook and put in some parameters.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I decide what I want to pass in, which is like the server name, the drive, and the new size or the amount to increase by or whatever. Right. Those are the things that change. And then within it's that same thing with DSC where you want to separate your data from your code. So like whatever the data is that's going to be different is going to come in as an input, and then everything that's the same is your tasks. Right. You're going to run the same operation just with different inputs.
Yeah, interesting.
Ooh, this is a big question. Hold on, let's see.
Yeah, I was just reading.
Pipeline on AWS that could partly be deployed with some Terraform. Best practice for where. Draw the borderline on where Ansible exists. So I don't know much about Octopus deploy, but from what I've heard people talk about who use Terraform, the interaction there seems to be use Terraform for the machine provisioning, and then use Ansible or PowerShell DSC for the inside the OS configuration. Okay, so it's like a pipeline tool like Jenkins or something. So it's running like all of that, and then yeah. So if you were just configuring Windows state, PowerShell DSC might make sense. As an API, they can be called to push. Okay, so yeah, I mean, where Ansible would come in would be if you wanted to do more than just, or if you just didn't want to use DSC. You know, you could do it for just configuration, or you could do it for like the whole thing. You could have like Ansible can be just system configuration, or it can be like your orchestration engine, right? So like where you might write a pipeline to say do this, then do this, then do this. You could potentially just have an Ansible playbook do all those things and make calls out to Terraform and calls out to Octopus Deploy or whatever, right? So it can kind of do whatever you want it to. In that scenario, I'd say like, well, you know, figure out what you're missing and like where could you potentially fit it. Like in that scenario, like the easiest thing would you could replace DSC with it if you wanted to. I don't know that, you know, if DSC wasn't working for you, you could do that role. But again, in that scenario, like you might be dropping, if you're dropping them off in an offline scenario and saying run this to get it on the network, Ansible isn't going to do that part for you because it's got to be able to connect to the machine. So it's tricky in like a bare metal provisioning. Like the machine's got to get up on the network, have remoting, be accessible with IP or name before you can connect to it. And DSC wouldn't have that. Like if you were injecting like a predetermined MOF or something at build time. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. It depends.
Well, this was awesome stuff, man. This was really awesome stuff.
Yeah. Got any other insights for finding any more major resources?
Do what?
Any other thoughts for other places for some other stuff other than blogs, people, your stuff, any other kind of good places? You know, earlier you talked about, just the Ansible website. Are there any kind of tricks of the trade? Hey, I follow these people. These are good places to, get some good content.
Yeah. Jeff Geerling. There you go. Dan got it. He's kind of the guy. He's got a book. I forget the name of it. It's Ansible DevOps or something like that. So that's sort of the definitive guide on. He's sort of the definitive guy on Ansible. So if you go follow him and see what he's up to. He's got a book and tons of blog posts and stuff he's written. And really, honestly, most of what I get is from the official documentation. It's really, really good. Like if you go to Google and search Ansible and then whatever it is you want to know about, like one of the first links is always going to be like official documentation. So there you go, Ansible for DevOps. That's the name of the book. So that's good. But yeah, the official documentation is great. It really is.
Cool.
So all the modules. There's the whole new thing with collections, which I was mentioning how they're kind of separating the module code from the Ansible like guts. So it's kind of more like DSC where the resources are separate from the engine. Before they were all packaged together, so they're starting to separate that out now. It's more like an installable package. So you could you look up Ansible collections and kind of read up. And Ansible Galaxy is a term that you can read up on all of that, and that's kind of new stuff, which I still need to read up on and kind of get up to speed on. But yeah, that's kind of it's a whole thing. Once you get in on it, And then Stack Overflow, of course, is number 2 on all those Google searches.
Cool. Well, again, like Mike said, great content, and thanks for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. I've got a whole other section here after this on how to write custom modules, but I guess we lost everybody. So we'll have to do that another time. But
yeah, why don't we break? Because we are starting to fade with people, so I don't want you to present to nobody. That's no fun. So first of all, let me say thank you to Jeremy for doing this tonight. We really appreciate that. It was a lot of good stuff, and thanks to the folks that stuck it out to the end, watched it online. Hope you enjoyed this video. Jeremy is definitely someone who should take a look at his stuff online. We mentioned Josh Duffney and some others, Jeff Geerling. These are really some people in the industry that are doing great stuff. Hope you enjoyed this. Stick around for more on the Research Triangle PowerShell Users Group YouTube channel with plenty of stuff to come. We're going to say good night and thank you.